Well, the Jewish Board of Deputies has condemned the show of support for Palestine by the ANC and President Cyril Ramaphosa. Let's unpack part of what we're seeing unfold in this country with International Relations Honorary Professor at Wits University, John Stremlau. Professor Stremlau, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. So yesterday's move, and one obviously can not question the visual of it, right? Seeing the ANC, NEC leaders wearing those scarves, carrying small flags of Palestine, as I was saying earlier, being unequivocal in their support. It's a position that the ANC has maintained for a long time. Why do you think that it has suddenly ruffled feathers in the way that we're seeing?
Well, I could expect the feathers that you mentioned here, that is to say the Zionists and the Jewish community in South Africa would have their feathers ruffled. But I'd like to step back for a second and try to put what Cyril Ramaphosa was saying into a broader context of the peace process that has been derailed by this heinous invasion, but also by the neglect of the Palestinian in effect, isolation and apartheid state that Cyril Ramaphosa referred to, and that my old boss, Jimmy Carter, titled his book, Peace, Not Apartheid. And if you're going to have a peace process, it is incumbent upon the Palestinians to feel they have a friend comparable to the United States support for Israel. And because South Africa and the United States have a very rich dialogue going about a bunch of issues that they may have differences on, I see a complementarity to the support that, and I stress this repeatedly, I've listened to President Ramaphosa's comments, I've read the statements by the DIRCO, I've listened to Dr. Pandor and comment on this, and they always referred the Palestinian people. Never is Fatah or never is, especially is Hamas mentioned. The identification is with the Palestinian people and their aspirations for a homeland secure and home to all who live in it, including Muslims and Jews and Christians. And therefore, I think if there ever is going to be a peace process, South Africa is positioned to. Now, unfortunately, there is no leadership willing to take the risks or who are strong enough to take ownership of a peace process comparable to what Nelson Mandela and Frederick de Klerk did here and all those around them, in terms of getting a negotiation through, including Cyril Ramaphosa. But Cyril Ramaphosa, don't forget, played a critical role in monitoring the Irish Good Friday Accord that had been going on. The fighting had been going on in Ireland for 400 years, as Jerry Adams liked to remind everybody. And they played a terrific role that could be seen to be possible here if, in fact, the international community is prepared to regard the Palestinian situation, the Palestinian people, as in a kind of apartheid, because that was a very popular image that mobilized international opinion. And if they could agree on a two-state solution as a vision, which was, in fact, almost negotiated in 2000 under Bill Clinton, then you'd have a process that maybe if you had different leadership on both sides, then you could get some progress. That's my hope.
Professor Stremlau, we have just in the next couple of weeks, at the beginning of November, the AGOA forum that will be held in South Africa. As you've said, President Ramaphosa has clearly put his hand up, and inadvertently the country's hand up, to play a role in potential mediation efforts that may take place in the Middle East. Do you foresee that forum being used as an opportunity to do that?
No, I'm just happy that the AGOA forum is going ahead. I think that given the elections on deck for President Biden in November of 2024 and Cyril Ramaphosa probably before that, which are definitive elections, I mean, really inflection points in the domestic politics. And you alluded to in your earlier stories to the very complex and impressive and pressing agenda that is domestic politics. Most people don't care about foreign policy, most voters. However, Anthony Blinken and Naledi Pandor have a very good working relationship. They could delegate assistants and representatives, or they could do it themselves and report back to Cyril Ramaphosa and to Joe Biden. I can see lots of ways that you could move the process forward if you could have on the other side reasonable leaders like Ehud Barak was, and even Yasser Arafat, but he couldn't make up his mind in 2000. But Abbas is 97. Hamas is clearly not an interlocutor, and the Palestinians have to come up with some leaders that would own the process, and the Israelis have to come up with leaders that would own the process and be willing to negotiate. Maybe, just maybe, this Holocaust of violence and the pending movement of 1 million people that the Israelis have ordered. I mean, my God, how can they move 1.2 million people to the south of this open air prison camp that has been around for 75 years? I mean, it is lancing the boil that is been neglected for too long. The regional powers seem to want to have a peaceful resolution around the two-state solution that the King of Jordan endorsed. I think South Africa is positioning itself very, very well to represent the interests of the Palestinian people.
Professor Stremlau, before I let you go, when we look at much of the language that is coming out of this conflict, predominantly it's still very, very tense. It's fueled with a lot of anger, a lot of emotions. And there's been a suggestion that perhaps the moment is not quite right or not ripe for mediation. Do you hold that view that, in fact, it does have to get to a certain point before there can be any kind of intervention?
Well, I think you have to do your homework now and pre-position. A crisis like this is, to take the cliche, too important to waste. And I think that maybe, just maybe, this has been a wake-up call that it's a terrible. And by the way, Cyril Ramaphosa and Naledi Pandor have both said they don't condone the killing of civilians on either side, and it's a travesty that has put families at risk, pregnant women at risk, elderly at risk, kids at risk, and they are not the combatants in a genuine war. I mean, the U.S. fought a terrible civil war, but it was not involving civilians. And this is a case where you've got to stand back and restrain both the Israelis and Hamas, but focus instead, as Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC government has done, on the well-being of the Palestinian people, and, by the way, the well-being of the Israeli people. But that America has got the back of Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister at the moment, but he's a really, really right-wing, the most right-wing government that they've ever had in Israel. So I hope that this failure of intelligence and it being able to defend Israel works to undo him, and someone more moderate comes to the fore. Someone more moderate than Hamas comes to the fore in representing the Palestinian people, and we get some serious negotiations.
All
but
right.
Now is the time to cultivate that possibility.
All right. Professor John Stremlau, thank you so much for your time tonight on News at Prime.